What is up, listeners, and welcome back to Slide Into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, and this past week of college football playoff games and bowl games have been super eventful. Only one team in the entire, out of all the teams that had byes this past Wednesday, Thursday of college football playoff games, came out with the win. That, of course, being the Indiana Hoosiers beating Alabama in the Rose Bowl. That game also being the most watched college football playoff game ever with 22.4 million views. Huge number, especially considering the facts that, it's the lowly Indiana football program, which never really used to bring in a lot of views, but now it's bringing in views. And, for big media like ESPN and CBS and CBS, this actually is a great thing. But for ESPN, one of the arguments that has been used in the past is the eyes argument. Who gets the most eyes? Who gets the most viewership? And for a long time, that never used to be Indiana football. And now it is. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to get into these other college football playoff games that happened. We're also going to get into bowl season, non-playoff bowl season, and the records. We touched a little bit on that last week. And now that it's concluded, I can give my takes, my honest takes, not the SEC hate takes, because there are so many of those out there. And I get it, because for a long time, the SEC has been thrown in our faces and has been great for a long time. And you think about the NFL and how everyone hated the Patriots because the Patriots are so good. And then finally, when the Patriots weren't good and the Chiefs, when the Patriots are good, the Chiefs were the underdogs when Patrick Mahomes was just getting into the NFL. And then once the Patriots left, then the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes kind of filled in their shoes and became the dynasty that everyone started to hate because they just kept winning and never lost. So now, in a way, we're seeing that shift in college football right now. The turn of a new era. And we've seen the turn of the new era the past couple years, but it's been a very gradual shift, because with college football, really with any college athletics, you don't see shifts right away. Why? Because these kids are in college. It's not like they're going to get traded right away. Well, actually, that's not even necessarily true, because of the transfer portal, and we're going to get into the transfer portal as well. But with the college football, it's just a more gradual switch, just because, kids are in school, you're constantly seeing new people. In the NFL, you're seeing a lot of new people as well. They come from the college level to NFL. But what I mean is that because college football, there are so many more teams, and you look at the levels of any sport, it's very pyramid schemed. You get to the professional level, and it's the little tiny triangle that's at the top, and then college level is like the little four-sided shape, at the bottom, just below that. So, a lot more people that we're seeing. There's a lot more different levels of talent in college football than there is in professional football, in NFL. So, yeah, it's just a little bit more gradual with college football. But this year, we're seeing it on full display. Okay. So, to start, we're going to talk about the Ohio State versus Miami game. And this one was huge. This one, I think, for me, was one of the more surprising games. I obviously said 2 weeks ago that I thought Ohio State was going to handle business against Miami. I thought that Ohio State's offensive line was going to hold up a little bit better, but clearly Miami took notes from the Big Ten championship game and was able to use their defensive line to get to Julian Sayin and get past the offensive line. And throughout the year, we've seen narratives from Ohio State that Ryan Day hasn't pulled out the full playbook and they haven't used all of their plays yet. They don't want to be explosive yet until it matters. And they were going into all these stats about how Ohio State was putting up less like total plays per game than everyone else. And everyone was like, oh, they're trying to rest their players until it matters most, when it's the college football playoff. And, they got the rest. They even got extra rest because they got a bye week, and they were only able to put up 14 points. And you look at quality teams that Ohio State has played, and by quality, I mean top 10 in this case. Look at Miami. They only put up 14 points, or really not even top 10, more like top 15. Look at Miami. They only put up 14 points. They only put up 14 points against Texas, and they only put up 10 points against Indiana. And those were the three highest ranked opponents that Ohio State has played so far this year. So when you look at it that way, it's really not all that surprising. But when you have seen how dominant Ohio State was in the regular season to the teams that were not Miami, Indiana, or Texas, it begs the question how legit this Ohio State team was. Maybe Oregon should have been in that Big Ten championship game. But now we're going to get an Oregon versus Indiana rematch, and it's going to be up to Indiana and Oregon to carry the streak of Big Ten dominance in the college football playoff. Miami, they surprised me a lot in this game, the way they were able to affect Julian Sayin. I mean, I really thought that Ohio State's offensive line was better than what they were, and they weren't. And Miami's defensive line, they showed out, and they even got a pick six from Julian Sayin in the second quarter, like right at the end of the first half. Started off 14-0, and Ohio State, they scored 7, and we were like, okay, maybe Ohio State is going to start coming back. Maybe they just had a slow start because of the bye week, right? Then Miami answered with a field goal to just extend the lead a little bit, and then Ohio State put up another touchdown. They were within 3, and then Miami got a touchdown towards the end of the game and sealed the deal. And it ultimately, Julian Sayin actually threw 2 interceptions, one of those interceptions being the game-sealing interception, kind of like with Texas A&M. So it's kind of interesting that happened with Miami again. But this time the game-sealing interception was not in the end zone. Miami, they were able to put up a bunch of rushing yards. They put up 153 rushing yards against Ohio State. They only put up 138 passing yards. I mean, these stats, you look at these stats, how Miami is rushing a lot better than they are passing. And typically, you almost see that more from an SEC team or a Big Ten team. I mean, because a lot of the times they're set up to dominate on the lines of scrimmage. When you dominate on the line of scrimmage, it's a lot easier to create holes for those running backs to, instead of getting maybe 2 or 3 yards, they could get 5 or 7 yards, right? So Miami is playing at the level of what you would expect a SEC or Big Ten team to play at. But yeah, just really great performance from Miami, and absolutely shocking the Ohio State Buckeyes. And moving on now to Oregon versus Texas Tech. Now this one, Oregon was favored in this game by 1.5, or 1, I should say. But I more say this one was surprising because Texas Tech has largely been dominant this whole year, besides that one loss that they took to Arizona State, which to me was kind of a fluky loss just because Texas Tech didn't have their starting quarterback, weren't 100% healthy. So there's an asterisk on that loss, okay? But Oregon, they put up 23 points, and they held Texas Tech to 0 points. I mean, Texas Tech in the first half of this game had the ball for a little less than 8 minutes. A little less than 8 minutes. I mean, just absolutely incredible dominance by the Oregon defense. And Oregon's offense, like Oregon, kind of like Indiana. Like I don't know if I've said this in a previous broadcast, but this is something I've definitely been thinking about. But Oregon is kind of built the same way Indiana is, where they can run the ball well. They can also pass the ball well. Like they do run pass option. And Oregon just because they were able to run the ball, they were able to just slowly break down Texas Tech's defensive line. And that's how they put up 17 points in the second half of the game. Because, I mean, in the first half, score was 6-0. Texas Tech could have scored a touchdown on the opening drive in the second half, and they could have taken the lead, right? They would have had a 1-point lead, but they got shut down, and that defense just got tired. Oregon's offensive performance wasn't perfect. Dante Moore threw an interception. He was 26 for 33, which is pretty impressive. I will say, like, that is really impressive. But rushing yards, they only put up 64, which, you're going up against this Texas Tech defensive line, one of the strongest defensive lines in college football this year. So this isn't entirely a surprise, okay? But because Texas Tech was so focused on the run game, Oregon was able to open the pass game. And that's something that, Dan Lanning, like, second to Kurt Cignetti, like, these are two coaches that I have a lot of respect for, and I love the way they play the game, or coach the game, I should say. But my point here is that they know their own strengths and weaknesses, and they know that their opponent is going to know your strengths and weaknesses. So, one of the things that was talked about on the broadcast for the Rose Bowl was how well Indiana can use whatever you're throwing at them against you, right? They talked about how Alabama was blitzing. It was the most that Alabama had blitzed all year long. And Indiana was able to turn that aggression against them. It opened up the pass game for Indiana to get those quick throws out. And Indiana was able to just fly down the field in the second half. And that's kind of what Oregon was able to do, except tiring out the Texas Tech defensive line by dominating the time of possession, by controlling the ball, or at least, controlling when the ball was had. Okay. I already said earlier that Texas Tech only had the ball for a little less than 8 minutes in the first half. Oregon had almost a 20-minute difference of separation in time of possession. Oregon had the ball for 38 minutes of this game. Texas Tech only had the ball for 22 minutes. That's not even a full half of football that Texas Tech held on to the ball. That's huge. That is a huge deal, okay? 38 minutes is huge. When you're controlling the ball like that, the reason why Oregon was doing that is because Texas Tech, when we've been watching them play, they've had an explosive offense in the games they've played. If their offense can hold on to the ball long enough, that offense can catch a spark. Now, granted, BYU was the best team that Texas Tech played, and we don't really know how good BYU is because BYU had a pretty easy Big 12 schedule for the most part. But, still, they could still get explosive if they need to. Now, Texas Tech didn't really have, they lost the quarterback battle 100% to Oregon. I think Dante Moore is better than the quarterback that Texas Tech had. But yeah, you control the time of possession, which allows you to tire out the defense, the opponent's defense, and it also limits the amount of opportunities that the opposing offense has against your defense. So your opponent's offense is just sitting on the bench saying la-ti-da, while their defense is out on the field just getting run over, play after play after play after play after play. Oregon ran 81 total plays in this game. 81. Now, a lot of people are saying, Oregon played a great game. And I'm not saying they didn't play a great game, but it was a far from perfect game. It was a far from perfect game. Oregon was 4 for 19 on third down efficiency. That is not good. That is not good for a top 5 team. Now, granted, they are going up against the number 4 team in the country. I know that, but still, 4 for 19 is not good. I mean, if you're going up against a team like Indiana, that is not good. They were 4 for 8 on fourth down efficiency. That's actually pretty good. That is pretty solid. Converting like that on fourth down is good. And going for it 8 times also can help tire out the defense as well, because that's one additional play in the drive that's not a punt, right? So, yeah, Dan Lanning, he's known for being pretty aggressive on fourth down a lot. Cignetti has been. I mean, he was last year. He was pretty aggressive on fourth down last year. This year, he hasn't really had to be aggressive on fourth down, but he is if he needs to be. But yeah, I'm mainly talking about Indiana right now, in addition to this game, like comparing Oregon and Indiana, because they play each other next in the Peach Bowl. So yeah, that's the main reason why I'm doing that. But speaking of Indiana and the Rose Bowl, we've got Indiana, Alabama. This one was just a beatdown. It was just a beatdown. And I think a large part of the reason why it was such a beatdown is because the momentum just dramatically shifted in Indiana's favor in this game early. It was very early when this happened. It was because Kalen DeBoer decided to fake punt on, I believe it was 4th and 2. It's either 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 on Alabama's own 30 or 35 yard line. Somewhere in between there. And it failed. Or it didn't fail, but Indiana saw through it. Didn't jump off sides. Initially, Alabama was trying to get Indiana to jump off sides. They didn't jump off sides. Alabama then, it's like, okay, Indiana knows we're going to fake it. So let's go for it. Let's try to go for it again. Instead of just punting, giving Indiana a longer field after Alabama's offense was able to sack Fernando Mendoza twice in their first drive. Let's just try to go for it on fourth down again. And it didn't work. So Indiana and their offense had a short field, and they were able to just go down and score. That was how they scored first. Okay. Then Indiana scored a field goal technically on, I think it was their second or third drive in the first quarter. And it was a long drive. It was their second drive in the first quarter. I remember that one being a really long drive. Then Indiana puts up 2 touchdowns. One of them being what I was talking about earlier with the short field, with Alabama failing to convert on fourth down. Then Indiana in the second half, they put up 21 points. Alabama was able to put up a field goal in the third quarter, but it really just, watching the game, did not look like much of a battle. It really didn't. It looked like one maybe the first 10 minutes of the first quarter. And then after that, it was just all Indiana. So, yeah, it was a completely dominating performance. And I mean, I had a feeling it was going to be pretty dominant just because, and this is going to sound crazy, but because of what the mainstream media was saying. And the reason I say that is because they struggled. They struggled to find any stat that was comparable to Indiana's. The only things they could really compare was the strength of schedule. And this next thing isn't even really comparison, but they were comparing the legacy of each of the programs and how Indiana is the second most losingest football program in college football history. And Alabama is, I believe, the third most winningest college football program in history. And they tried to say that, oh, the mystique of Alabama is going to frighten Indiana and they're going to lose. And it's like, it just, to me, seemed like they were pulling at straws. And I was like, okay, Indiana is going to win this game. It's just a matter of how much. My prediction that I had, I don't think I said the prediction on air, but I put it in a comment, and it was around this score. I had it at 33-10. I actually gave Alabama a touchdown, but I said it was going to be 33-10. I meant to put 34-10. I did the math wrong when I was writing the comment. So it was meant to be 34-10. I was thinking that Indiana was going to be taking 2 field goals and doing 1 less touchdown. But either way, I was really close to what the score was going to be. Now, part of me also thought that, it's Indiana has 3.5 weeks off. Alabama's coming off a great win against Oklahoma, right? Alabama's been to the Rose Bowl before. Kalen DeBoer has been to the Rose Bowl before. When he coached at Washington, I believe he was at the Rose Bowl at one point, or he at least has college football playoff experience in these bigger bowl games, right? So, I thought maybe Alabama would have put up a little bit more of a fight early. First half, I thought maybe in the second half, Indiana was going to get more dramatically faster, or at least, increase the tempo a little bit more. But it was a more gradual increase of tempo. It was like they were gradually putting their foot on the gas, but it was like the car Alabama was driving in. It's like they had their foot on the gas, but the engine just didn't want to work, right? So, great game by Fernando Mendoza. Also, 14 for 16. He was 8 for 8 when getting blitzed. Threw for 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. Kalen Black had 15 carries for 99 yards and a touchdown. Charlie Becker, he had 2 receptions for 51 yards and 1 touchdown. He scored the first touchdown of the game. Like, just a lot of great things going for Indiana. And there's going to be more that I'm going to talk about for Indiana later. And it's about the transfer portal. I'll just lead in with that. Like, it's about the transfer portal. But yeah, Alabama also lost this game, and I knew this was going to be a problem. I said this was going to be a problem, that Alabama just does not have an effective run game right now. And that's very atypical of what you see in an Alabama team. When your quarterback, who gets benched because he had a injury, I think it was a fractured rib or a broken rib, but he had an injury in his rib, and he is your leading rusher, and he was only in for half the game. That's horrible. That is horrible. Really bad. Ty Simpson rushed for 17 yards. Their next leading rusher was Daniel Hill with 13 yards. Then it was Kevin Riley with 2 yards. And then the backup quarterback, Austin Mack, had -8 yards. It was really bad for the rush yards for Alabama. Alabama totaled 23 rushing yards. 23 rushing yards. Indiana's run game in comparison, they put up they basically put up 20 times the amount of yards that Alabama put up. Or no, 10 times the amount of yards that Alabama put up. They put up 215 rushing yards, which is more than the total yards that Alabama had the entire game. That's insane. It's actually insane. And then Indiana's passing yards are almost exactly matched up with Alabama's total yards. They had 192 passing yards. Alabama had 193 total yards. I mean, it's just wow. Just something you don't really see all that often in a college football game, especially with Bama. Like, you typically see Bama dominant on the line of scrimmage, and they haven't been. And if you've been watching college football all season, this outcome really shouldn't surprise you. I mean, I wasn't too surprised. I was a little surprised. There was definitely part of me that was surprised. I'm not going to lie, just because just because of what Miami did and what Oregon did, and they didn't have bye weeks, and no team with the bye week had won a game yet. So in my head, I'm like, crap. Indiana's going up against Alabama. No bye teams have won. This is bad. But Indiana came through. Like, I swear, Cignetti-led teams, like, you give them more prep time, it's like they get better. It's like they get better because they are just so well prepared going into these games. And that's why I think Indiana, out of all the 8 teams that had bye weeks the past 2 years, why they found success and why the other teams did not. Because Indiana knows how much they need to rest. They know how much they need to prepare. They know how much they need to practice, be on the field. Cignetti has talked a lot about how often he has his guys practicing, or I guess how little in comparison to some, where it's more about efficiency. It's like, you get what you need to get done that day, then you're done. And he averages less practice time, so the players are more rested anyway, but also keeps the players rested and healthy. And that's one of the things that Sig is, that's one of his selling points. Like, he wants to keep the players rested and healthy, so that way they perform well no matter the occasion, no matter the amount of spotlight. For those mainstream media people out there who said that the spotlight was going to be too big. And Cignetti said in his post-game interview, why? The spotlight's too big because our name's Indiana? Like, that's what I said. Like, just because we're Indiana, or just because they're Indiana, spotlight's too big. It's crazy. But the final game that we're going to talk about is Ole Miss versus Georgia. Now, this one, I was on the edge of my seat when I was watching this game. I was freaking out, towards the end, because, okay, this was kind of like the Georgia Ole Miss game earlier this year, except in reverse, where Ole Miss was leading up until the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter, they just gave up a bunch of points. That's what Georgia did in this game. Georgia was leading for a majority of the game, besides the first half. Ole Miss put up 6 points in the first quarter, 2 field goals. Georgia puts up 21 points in the second quarter. Ole Miss puts up a touchdown, tries to go for a 2-point conversion. They fail the 2-point conversion, and they go to the locker room with the score being 12-21. Now, Ole Miss's defense was able to hold Georgia to a field goal. The offense was able to answer with a touchdown in the third quarter, And in the fourth quarter, Ole Miss puts up 20 points. They put up 20 points. Now, granted, 2 of those points were from a safety, because on the final return kickoff, Georgia, they tried to do the whole hot potato where, you just try to hold on to the ball and wait for a gap to open and toss it between each player. And then once a gap opens, you run through and go for the touchdown. That was Georgia's last minute effort to score in the final seconds of the game. There was about 6 seconds left on the clock. And Georgia tries this whole hot potato thing. The second person that receives the ball, he's right by the end zone line, and the ball's thrown low. Goes through his hands, and it hits the pylon. And that gave Ole Miss the safety with 1 second on the clock. And then Ole Miss receives the kickoff, and that was it. That was pretty much it. But they had to redo the final second like 3 different times. And it was pretty funny because Pete Golding on the sideline was like, what is going on? We already won. Like, let us meet in the field and let us celebrate the win. And oh my goodness, like it was great to see, honestly, because I was not happy with the way Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss a month ago. It just made me mad. And I was partially mad for Lane Kiffin because I felt he was making the wrong decision. Because you look at what Cignetti is doing at Indiana, Lane Kiffin was doing basically the same thing at Ole Miss, if you look at it. Both Ole Miss and Indiana, pretty irrelevant programs within each of the conferences, right? These coaches come in, they bring their personnel. Now, granted, Cignetti came from the G5 level, and Lane Kiffin came from, I believe it was USC at the time. And then he goes to Ole Miss and he builds the program up. And Ole Miss was going to pay him, I believe it was $500,000 less than what LSU was offering. And despite the main reason for Lane Kiffin leaving, seeking a national championship, his now former team is 1 game away from going to the national championship game. Like, if Indiana doesn't end up winning, if they lose to Ole Miss, I wouldn't even be mad because I think it would be the funniest thing ever if Ole Miss won the college football playoffs and Lane Kiffin, his main reason for leaving Ole Miss was because he didn't think that they had a chance at winning the national winning a national championship. He thought he had a better shot at winning a national championship at LSU. And his former team goes and wins the national championship. Like, come on. Like, that'd be hilarious. That would be so funny. Like, imagine Ole Miss winning a national championship out of sheer spite. It would be hilarious. And you know what's even funnier is that Lane Kiffin is actually trying to take most of his assistants away from Ole Miss because a lot of his assistants on the offensive side of the ball, it was the wide receivers coach, tight ends coach, running back coach as well. The running back coach might be staying, but I know it was a pretty healthy amount of assistants that Lane had that were going to go to LSU after the college football playoffs were over. But then Lane was like, nah, I want most of you guys to come back. And I think it's partially because he thinks like he doesn't want Ole Miss to win a national championship because it's going to make him look horrible. It's going to make him look really bad. Okay? It's going to make him look terrible because, again, like I said before, Lane Kiffin's main reason for leaving Ole Miss, according to him, was because he thought he had a better chance at a national championship at LSU. Again, like it would be absolutely hilarious if this happened. It would be so funny. It'd be so funny. Okay, now, with that being said, the semifinal games are going to be Oregon versus Indiana and Ole Miss versus Miami. And before we talk about those, I've got a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the predictions that I have because now my playoff predictions bracket is totally busted. The only team that I got right or that is still in is Indiana. That's the only team I have left that's still in. But I did also say we were going to talk about the transfer portal, and we're also going to talk about mainly talk about Indiana and the transfer portal, and also the bowl game records. The bowl game records of each of the conferences and what it means. And the main reason I want to talk about it is because there are so many different arguments that are circulating around online. Some people saying the bowl games don't matter. Some people saying only the playoffs matter. Some people saying that, there's opt-outs, so are they playing the same team? Oh, well, the fifth best team of one conference is playing the eighth best team of another conference or something like that. Like, there's just all kinds of different arguments online, and there is some truth to these arguments, but I'm going to dissect each of them and I guess talk about how you can't really, especially if you're arguing for one conference, you're losing at least one of these arguments, right? So we're going to get into that in a second, but national championship predictions. So we've got, semifinal and national championship game predictions. We've got the first game being Miami versus Ole Miss. That's going to be played on Thursday, January 8th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. And this one's tricky because you've got Ole Miss, who has just an absolutely electric offense. They've made some changes on the defense that are good, like much improved defense. And I did allude to this in a previous broadcast, but the main reason why I had a feeling that Ole Miss was going to have defensive improvements was because they're being led by their defensive coordinator. Like, he's going to have more weight on decisions on defense than he already did. So that was the main reason why I had a feeling Ole Miss's defense was going to improve. However, in this game, I think it will be close. I think it will be very close, like Ole Miss, Georgia. And as much as I want to see Ole Miss go to the national championships out of spite, I do think Miami pulls this one out. And the main reason is because of their defensive line. Their defensive line has just balled out and exceeded expectations. They have just absolutely exceeded expectations. So I can't put any more doubt on this Miami team or Miami defensive line. I mean, I had doubt when they were going up against Ohio State's offensive line. I can't put any doubt on them anymore. I think Miami wins. I think it'll be close again. I think it'll be very close. I think it'll be a pretty mid-scoring game. I don't think it's going to be as high as what the Georgia Ole Miss game is going to be. But I do think both teams will put up sufficient points on the board. I also love Miami's run game right now. And I think what'll probably end up happening is kind of like the Oregon-Texas Tech game. I think Miami is going to dominate the time of possession. I think Miami is going to be able to run the ball a lot, or they're going to run the ball a lot. And I think they're going to be able to do it effectively. And ultimately, I think Miami being able to contain Ole Miss's explosive offense with a slower paced game on offense with their run game, as well as locking it down on the defensive line and forcing Trinidad Chambliss to throw the ball more into Miami's elite defensive backfield. I just think Miami is going to be able to control the game more than Ole Miss is going to be able to control the game. So I'm going to take Miami in this one. I think it's going to be like 28 to 24. I think it's going to be 28. No. Yeah, 28 to 24. I like 28 to 24, but I think Miami wins in the Fiesta Bowl. Then we've got the Peach Bowl. That's Oregon versus Indiana. I'm actually going to be at that game in person. So it'll be very interesting to see. I've never been to a bowl game like this before. So it's going to be a very fun experience, whether Indiana wins or loses, because obviously I'm rooting for Indiana. But that game's going to be played Friday, 6:30 p.m. Central Time. And I mean, I kind of said this earlier. Like I said, Indiana and Oregon built very similarly, very similar playing styles, very similar strengths. But ultimately, I think Indiana is going to get the win again. Now, I know one of the things in college football is that it's hard to beat the same team twice. And I do believe that. I do think that's true. However, with the way Texas Tech's defense was able to contain Oregon to 23 points, I think Oregon, the way they were dominating that game, time of possession wise, they probably should have put up at least one or two more touchdowns. And the way Indiana performed against Alabama, I think Indiana's defense, despite the injuries, is in a better spot. And since these teams have played each other, I think this actually plays to Indiana's advantage because, like I said earlier, Indiana is always a prepared team. They're always a well-prepared team. They make very little mistakes. And I think Indiana beats Oregon again. I think they beat them again. I think it'll be a pretty similar game to last time. But I think one of the main weaknesses that Oregon has that Indiana does not have is the offensive line. I think Oregon is significantly weaker on the offensive line than Indiana is. And Oregon didn't really have to deal with Mikael Kamara too much. Again, due to other defensive linemen. Like, he was able to kind of share the love with the other defensive linemen. But due to injuries, Mikael Kamara has been able, he did a lot more in that game against Bama. And I think Oregon is going to have more to prepare for than Indiana is going to, in my opinion. So that's why I'm giving the edge to Indiana, because of Oregon's offensive line and because of the fact that Indiana, they just look unstoppable. I mean, I don't really know how else to say it. Indiana just looks unstoppable right now. And since Ohio State and Georgia are out, I think Indiana has a very likely shot, a much easier path to the national championship. And it's, again, just because of the way the teams match up. So my national championship going into January 9th, or for January 19th, is Indiana versus Miami, the 1 versus the 10 seed. And the storyline is going to be really interesting because it's going to be Fernando Mendoza going up against the home team in his hometown. That's going to be a really fun storyline to follow. So I think that'll be a very interesting game just because there's going to be high stakes for both teams. Miami has been largely irrelevant for the good part of 20 years. Indiana has been irrelevant for pretty much ever in football, but it's going to be a battle. I think it's going to be a very defensive battle between Indiana and Miami. I could see the score coming out to the Big Ten championship game. I think Indiana wins 16-10. I think Indiana puts up one extra field goal on Miami. But I think Indiana's defense, the defensive line, is going to be able to contain Miami's run game. I think Miami's run game is good, but I think they're going to be able to contain Miami's run game and force Carson Beck to throw the ball. And Indiana has some great defensive ends and safeties that are going to be able to pick the ball off or force drops. But I have it so close because I think Miami's defensive line is also insanely good. They are built up there just like Indiana is. And I think Miami, out of the teams that Indiana has played in the playoffs, those being Oregon and Alabama, I think Miami is going to be able to apply a lot more pressure than those teams are going to be able to. So that's why I have it as such a low scoring game, because I think both quarterbacks are going to be under a lot of pressure, and there's going to be mistakes made, but ultimately I think Indiana, I think Indiana's quarterback, I think that quarterback battle is going to be huge because both of them are going to have to throw the ball. And I trust Fernando Mendoza to throw the ball more than I do Carson Beck to throw the ball. So I'm taking Indiana to be the national champions. And I believe I had Indiana as national champions going into this playoff as well in my initial prediction. So the only thing that really changed was the teams that Indiana was facing and, the other teams that were just the other 4 teams at this point of the playoffs. So yeah, with that, let's talk a little bit about bowl season. Okay. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, like I said before, there are so many arguments that are made, and, you can interpret it however you want. You can look at different things. There's so many different things you can look at to make the bowl standings irrelevant. But yeah, to me, I think it matters to a degree. I don't think it 100% matters, but I do because, bowl games, it's not a perfect system. And you look at some of these conference result or these interconference battles, you look at these records, and there's different things that you can dissect. There's a lot of different things that you can dissect. Now, with that being said, we look at these conference records, and there are some pretty surprising ones, okay? There are some pretty surprising records. The Big Ten being as dominant as they were in their bowl season so far, not too surprising. Big Ten right now is 9-4 in bowls. Obviously, they're going to take one loss and get one win with this semifinal game coming up with Indiana and Oregon. They're going to be 10-5 by the end of the week, no matter how you slice it. SEC, they're either going to be 4-10 or they're going to be 5-9. And that depends on what Ole Miss does in this game against Miami. ACC currently is 8-4. They have the opportunity to go 9-4, or they're going to sit at 8-5 for bowl season. Now, for the ACC, this is actually great in comparison to last year. Last year, they only had 1 bowl game win. This year, they could have 9, possibly 10 if they win the national championship. So that's huge. Big 12 had a pretty solid start. They were 4-0 last time I was live, and now they're 4-4. They're at 500. They're at .500. Perfect .500. Those are the records of the Power 4 conferences. Then move on to the American, 5-4. That's pretty solid for Group of 5, considering they are going up against Power 4 opponents. Conference USA, 4-3, winning record. That's pretty good. Independence, 0-1. Talked about that already last week. MAC is 2-3. Not entirely surprising. Mountain West, 2-5. They have the worst winning percentage out of the teams out of the conferences besides Independence. And Sunbelt is 4-6. So they have a losing record as well, which, again, that's pretty common to see with these Group of 5 teams. But you look at some of the outcomes, one of them, Iowa versus Vandy. Iowa won that game. There was only one opt-out in that game. And the reason I bring that up is because that's an argument that a lot of people use whenever their teams lose, no matter what conference you're from. They always use opt-outs as an excuse. Vandy had one opt-out, and that was their tight end. Otherwise, all the starters were in. Everybody. Okay? Iowa and Vandy were in the same spot in the standings within each of their conferences. And Iowa gave belt to Vandy. And you know what? I think Iowa probably came in extra motivated because I think this was back in September when Diego Pavia was trash-talking Iowa, really trash-talking the Big Ten, but he was talking about Iowa and how, you only have to put up 7 points against Iowa. But Iowa ended up dropping 34 on Vandy and Diego Pavia. So, yeah, that didn't really end well for little buddy there, but is what it is for Lil Diego, I suppose. Now, a lot of people that's one of the things people bring up. You look at LSU Houston, right? LSU was ranked middle to the low part of the SEC conference. And I don't remember their exact ranking within the conference, but I know it was significantly low, especially from, where they were supposed to be. They ended up they finished 10th in the SEC. They went up against Houston. This is the team they lost to, and Houston was the 4th ranked Big 12 team. Now, people SEC people are going to be like, oh, well, our 10th best team was going up against the Big 12's 4th best team. That's not fair. But the only reason why I don't necessarily take that seriously is because one of the things that the SEC people will say to argue for them to have more teams in the playoffs and to have, their teams ranked all the time is that, oh, well, a mid-level, low-level SEC team would be conference champion in every other conference except for the SEC. Basically, just saying that the SEC is the toughest conference because they're the SEC. At one point, I will say this, at one point that's true. Now, it's not really true anymore. And one of the things that I have said on TikTok Lives and even on this broadcast is that it doesn't matter what conference you're in anymore. It doesn't matter what patch you have on your jersey. It really doesn't at the end of the day. The two things, I've said this before, but the two things that matter the most in college football, coaching and NIL. Those are the two things that matter because coaching, that allows you to develop. That allows the players you bring in to grow. NIL allows you more opportunities to bring in players. It allows you a bigger checkbook, allows you to bring in more talented players, whether that be from the portal or whether that be from recruiting in high school. Either way, you're bringing in more people. So again, that's why I say those two things are important because you have a coach like Cignetti. You give him a budget, he knows how to recruit players. He knows who he wants on his team. He recruits a certain way. You give him the NIL money, he's going to handpick the guys that he wants. It's just facts. And that's the way all coaches are. And you know what? Speaking of Indiana and transfers, which I'm going to get into right now, Indiana landed 6 transfers on Sunday. They landed 6. I believe it might actually be 7 now, but 6 transfers on Sunday. They landed now former Wisconsin safety Preston Zachman. They also landed a wide receiver from Michigan State, Nick Marsh. He was the number 22 ranked overall player in the portal, number 6 ranked wide receiver. Huge, again, really huge. Then we have Kansas State, Toby Osunami. He was the number 4 ranked edge in the portal, number 28 ranked overall player in the portal. Indiana also landed TCU quarterback Josh Hoover, who was ranked number 12 overall in the portal and number 4 in the quarterback position in the portal. Again, huge. He was on a lot of people's hot boards for Indiana. Indiana also got Cincinnati safety Jaquan Sanks, number 398 overall, number 39 at the safety position in the portal. They also acquired Boston College running back Turbo Richard. Huge. Nationally, at overall, 85th. At the running back position, 7th. This isn't something you'd see the old Indiana do. This is not something you'd see happen with the Tom Allen Indiana or really just anyone else with Indiana. This is just unheard of. This is huge. This is insanely huge. So again, like, it shows that it doesn't necessarily matter as much because Indiana has the largest living alumni base in the country. 815,000 plus strong. Money's going to come in. People are committed to keeping IU football great. They are. That's just the way it is. It's a new era, folks. It's a new era. So, yeah, that's the transfer portal, and at least with Indiana. And that's also the, what I think about the arguments with the, bowl game records, because everyone likes to take shots, throw stones at other conferences. And I've never been a conference fan. I've never been a fan of a conference. I've only been fan of teams. I like teams. I don't like conferences. Because why would you like conferences? You're right. Like, if the conference succeeds, your rival sometimes will succeed. Like, I've seen some people on the Tennessee side say this, like Tennessee Volunteers fans saying this. They were ecstatic that Iowa beat Vandy. Why? Because Vandy is Tennessee's rival. They hate Vandy. They're the in-state rival. They're within the SEC. So it's like, it's a very deep argument. A very deep argument, I guess, to put it plainly, really. But yeah, that's my summary of that. But with the transfer portal, I guess just going back to the transfer portal more on a general viewpoint before I sign off, there's been a couple of shocking entries into the transfer portal. I think for me, the most shocking one was Coy Parrish of Minnesota, because there was no indication as to him leaving Minnesota. He was the all Big Ten safety. That's huge, like really huge. Great player, young player as well. He was going to commit to Ohio State, and he decommitted from Ohio State last minute and decided to play at Minnesota. I didn't think he was going to leave, but he ended up leaving. And the amount of players that was in the portal is shocking as well. When the transfer portal era first started, it was maybe like 1,500 football players that entered. This year, there's about 4,500 players that are currently in the portal. It's just absolutely insane. And we're going to talk about that next time. Absolutely. But for right now, got to sign off because out of time. But thank you guys for tuning in. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Patreon, YouTube, for 2026, we moved to video for those platforms. So if you want to listen there, it's going to be over video. If you're listening on WVLP, it's still going to be sound. But yeah, if you want to see hot takes, because I do post hot takes on college football, college basketball, and I'm going to start posting hot takes for swimming as well, just because there's been some crazy stuff going on there with the enhanced games. I'm going to be posting hot takes there once a week in written form, so that keep an eye out for that. Also, there's college basketball that's going to be coming up, and I'm going to start posting my rankings for that once the college football season has come to a conclusion. Next week is also going to be pretty college football focused as well. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. I might have a guest next time as well. That's going to be in the works. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Slide out.